Hello everyone, Ashlyn here, coming at you with another Fi-related video. Today, I'm going to be talking about the recent BNR changes and just generally how they affect Fi going into the future metagame and RTN season. In case you didn't see, the BNR included Chart the High Seas, Wrath of Retribution, Brand with Cinderclaw, Yellow and Blue Orb Weaver Spinneret, and Rootbound Carapace. Needless to say, Fi Purple chat is on fire. People were not really expecting Brand to actually happen, and they thought it was just going to be Wrath of Retribution. But all the doomering aside, is Fi actually really bad post BNR? Is he even viable at this point? Should you even take him to RTN season? This video is kind of trying to aim to answer that question. I think there's kind of like two things that actually make this BNR affect Fi. It's not just the change in how he builds, but it's also the larger metagame around him. The only problem with that is I'm not a pro player. I don't go on the Runaways podcast, and I'm not a Breakpoints co-host. Like, I don't know this metagame stuff. I just wait until the newest tournament comes out and then see where I go from there. So this video is actually going to more focus on how does this specifically change the Fi build, and then kind of take a look at his power level. Brand is a Draconic Hedgehog starter that also allows you to make some non-Draconic cards Draconic. Both of these kind of come into play when building them, especially when you run 5 copies of the card. I think the easier of the two to tackle is how do we get around Brand's branding effect? And I think the solution is just to run less non-Draconic cards. Fire Tenant is immediately on my hit list. I think you should take it out of the list just simply because it worked with 5 brands that you actually wanted to play and the fealty generation, but now without those, it's going to be really bricky with Oath of Loyalty, and the +1 power on offense is not going to be worth the amount of times it's just going to shit the bed. The other possible solution is to run more fealty generators, but the only way to do that was with Demonstrate Devotion, and we already run a pretty tight cost curve as is, so adding more 1 cost will just increase our inconsistency. There's only one problem with replacing Fire Tenant, is now that's 3 more cards, adding up to a total of 11 that we need to replace in the list. Realistically, only the red and yellow brands were really kind of the Draconic starters out of the 3 brands, so let's talk about our replacements for Fire Tenant and the blue brand first. Blue brand can be easily replaced by blue Rising Resentment. It's functionally the same card 99% of the time. It sometimes has a relevant on hit, which is nice, so there's not really a power level difference. Plus, we don't really need the branding effect anymore for cutting Fire Tenant Strike first. As for Fire Tenant, I think Lava Vein Loyalty fills that slot nicely of being a Draconic extender. You lose the 1 value on offense, but you gain 1 value on defense, which can help a lot into the Marios and the Guardians of the world, but is still a very good card if you need to use it offensively. So just keep it simple. Yeah, just run yellow Rising Resentment, and then surely we have another 0 for 3 Draconic Head Jab starter, right? We unfortunately do not. And your immediate reaction might be, let's add a 1 cost Draconic Unconditional Go Again starter. But as I said before, our 1 costs, we kind of have to have a certain amount. Around 6 or 7 is kind of the good amount that you want to have to not make your deck kind of fuck up a little bit. So if we can't have a natural 0 cost Draconic starter, and we need to replace these 5 slots, there's only kind of one way to do that, which is putting in some emergency starters. An emergency starter is essentially a card that worst case can be used as a starter, but often comes with a drawback if used in that fashion. Great example of this is all the blues in your deck. They can all be pitched to Fi to activate to get the Phoenix Flame, play it on the first chain link, and then be able to start the chain from there. But you lose the 1 value off the flame and the 3 value off of the sword that you would have swung with the blue. So it's not very good to do that often. Another example of this is Flame Call Awakening. It's a card that's pretty good if used as a starter. A 1 for 3 with natural go again, that's Draconic, pretty good. But if you use it as an extender, you can get a Phoenix Flame from your deck, which can sometimes equate to +1 or even +2 value with Shuko. And so now we're kind of left with what emergency starters can we put in there? And what I've come up with is 2 Flame Calls, 1 Phoenix, and then 3 Red Rise from the Ashes. I know I'm replacing 5 cards with 6 cards, but I'm actually going to cut 1 Mounting Anger just to make sure our 1 costs are around the 7 mark. I want to look at these cards kind of individually. Rise from the Ashes as a starter is essentially a 0 for 2. You get the Phoenix Flame back, and you do get the +3 offensively, but you lose out on the +1 from the Phoenix Flame when it's played later in the chain. with 2 Phoenix Flames in Graveyard, or a lot of closed chain sequencing, you can actually make this card get up to 5 value if you consider Shuko as a part of that. So really, if we kind of look at these cards compared to Brand, is that they have lower lows than Brand, but they have much higher highs. There's obviously like a value proposition when it comes to consistency, and there is also a value proposition that comes with inconsistency. But I think that's kind of subject for a much longer video than this one. A lot of y'all's first reaction might be, hey, this doesn't look too great. The amount of starters we had pre-BNR was around 26. And if you put that in the hypogeometric calculator on February, you get around a 10% chance to draw no starter. However, if you take out the 8 brands from the equation, you get around a 23% chance for no starter, which is 1/4 of hands. Really freaking bad. In actuality, these numbers are a little bit less, or even a lot more less than you otherwise would think, because of a lot of the interactions with deck. Like, for example, Rake Over the Coals plus Blaze Headlong can turn Blaze Headlong into a starter just by playing the red card at instant speed. And while this only decreases the no starters draw statistic by a little bit for the Brand build, for the Rise from the Ashes and the Flamecall Awakening build, it's actually a lot less than you think. If you look at how these 4 cards interact, it's pretty simple. There are some cards that actually don't need a Draconic Chain Link, they just need a red to be played. And so if you have a lot of red cards that you can play that are not Draconic starters, and then you have a lot of cards that can function as Draconic starters, if you play a red and you mix and you mesh and you put them all together, you get that a lot of the time, you're just gonna draw some of these cards together and your non-starters will turn into starters and lower that statistic by a good margin. I think there's not a lot I can do to kind of prove to you how good this deck feels besides you just play it. At the start, it's going to feel weird, but once you take the time to learn how to play with 2 Phoenix Flames, how to close chain with Rise from the Ashes, how to sequence this stuff properly, you'll start to really see how the deck kind of glues itself together, and the fact that it really doesn't feel bad to play at all. So the mean power level of Phi has decreased just a tiny bit from losing the brands. However, the range of power that he can give on an individual game has increased on both ends. Also, a random thing about having Flamecall mainboard is that we get to have 3 extra sideboard slots, which is extremely value in a metagame where we don't really know what's going on. If you want the simple TLDR, Phi is completely fine. This ban seems like a lot, but in reality, we had a clear way to pivot to where we don't lose much of the average value, but we do add a little bit of variance, which, you know, sucks a little bit. As always, my Phi builds are a solution and not the solution. So if you have any concerns or suggestions for the build, or, you know, videos I want to cover next, or even some just burning questions, please ask them in the comment section. I will try to reply to as many people as I can. And I think that's all I wanted to say with this video. So thanks for watching. Love the Phi Melia, and happy holidays to everyone out there. Peace.